Y'all make sure I'm in your home. Baby, that loud. Don't bounce.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Black Collections, Access, Use, and Beyond. My name is Derek Mosley. I'm the Archives Manager here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, and it is my pleasure to have worked to create this panel with these awesome panelists. We are so excited, and this is going to be a treat for everyone that is here. I am going to introduce our moderator, Miss Andrea Jackson Gavin. She is a devoted member of her family, friend, and server of her community, a staunch HBCU advocate, and the program director of the HBCU Digital Library Trust. Before joining Harvard Library in this role, she served in several capacities at the Atlanta University Center, Robert W. Woodruff Library, including Director of Engagement and Scholarship, grant writer, and an administrator, as well as head of the Archives Research Center. She previously was the executive director of the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, based at the University of Chicago Libraries, where she led activities to support preservation, digitization, accessibility, and collection acquisitions on African American history in the Chicagoland area. She is a proud alumna of Spelman College and New York University with a MA in U.S. History and a certification in Archives Management. She also participated in the Archives Leadership Institute, the Harvard Graduate School of Education Leadership Institute for Academic Librarians, and was honored as a 2018 Fellow of the Society of Georgia Archivists. She is the co-author of Funding the Future of African American Religious Archival Collections at the Atlanta University Center Woodruff Library, which was published in the Theological Librarianship Journal. She is a dedicated member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the Links Incorporated. Please welcome Miss Andrea Jackson Gavin.
Derek was supposed to cut that short, so thank you all for indulging in that. I want to just take a point of privilege on behalf of the panelists to really thank Derek Mosley. We all have worked closely with him in our professional environments and also our extracurricular. And he is a good friend, and we really appreciate him for helping to gather us together. I also want to thank Victor Simmons, director of the Auburn Avenue Research Library, and the entire team that has put this conference together. This is just outstanding. Can we get a round of applause for them? So I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, and then we will get right into some conversation, and we will end with enough time to have Q&A with the audience. So please have your questions ready for us. I'm going to start actually all the way down to my far left, your right. Aletha Moore Carter. She's the lead archivist for Morehouse College Archives at the Atlanta University Center Woodruff Library. She previously served as the digitization project manager for the Our Story project, a CLEAR grant-funded initiative to digitize over 600,000 photographs and pages of publications documenting the historical Atlanta University Center. She's a proud alumna of Spelman College, and she has a master's degree in archival studies from Clayton State University. Aletha Moore Carter. Brittany Newberry is the music and popular culture archivist at Georgia State University. She previously worked as a processing archivist at the Atlanta University Center Woodruff Library. At Georgia State, Brittany acquires, preserves, and makes accessible materials documenting the 20th and 21st century American music and culture. She's a very active member of the Society of American Archivists and the Society of Georgia Archivists. She has presented at many conferences and workshops and actively researches and pursues professional interests in African American archives, social justice, and archival activism, student-centered archives, and donor relations. Brittany Newberry. Dr. Aisha M. Johnson is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Outreach at the Georgia Institute of Technology Library. She's an influential leader in both scholarship and practice. She champions access, inclusivity, and strategic leadership. Her mission is to advance the field by cultivating new and experienced professionals as scholar practitioners and leaders who advocate for the underserved. Dr. Johnson authored the African American Struggle for Library Equality and has published extensively on representation and inclusion in library and information science. Dr. Aisha Johnson. And Gabrielle Dudley. She is the Interim Co-Director and Assistant Director of Public Services at the Stuart A. Rose Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Book Library at Emory University. She leads a team focused on increasing access to and awareness of Rose Library's collections through reference, outreach, exhibition, loan, and instruction program activities. She has taught courses, curated exhibitions, and published articles on access to Black archival collections. In 2022, we were all so proud that she was nominated by President Biden to serve as a member of the Civil Rights Cold Case Records Review Board. She earned her MA in Public History and MLIS from the University of South Carolina and holds a BA in History from the University of Montevallo. Thank you. In Alabama. Gabrielle Dudley. All right, so I would like to just ask each of our panelists to just take a moment to talk about your institution's Black archives and or Black collections that you have been particularly involved with, engaged with during your professional career. And we'll start here with you, Gabby.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Andrea. So the Rose Library's African American collections are really broad, but our collection started with our inaugural curator of African American collections in 1999. And I'm glad you had me go first before like AUC talks about how much longer of a history they've had. But our collections really focus on the civil rights movement, civil rights activity, particularly here within the city of Atlanta, Blacks in the left, so African Americans in the Communist Party. Black print culture is sort of the founding collection for us, and so that is materials that were created by Black communities for dissemination within Black communities, so like an original FUBU concept. But I might be dating myself by saying FUBU here. But anyway, but that's sort of where our collection was founded. And then a collection that means a lot to me personally is our Black women writers collections that we have really invested in within the last 15 years or so. So I'll stop there and pass it on.
Thank you. So while I serve as Associate Dean and I work as an administrator, I am an archivist. I absolutely love this profession. That's where I've met not only Andrea, but all of these ladies within the profession. So I will forever be an archivist, but I'm in a position where I can have influence in the work that we do. So shout out to my amazing team, because I sent them a last minute request and I was like, I need everything. Because I think it's so important as an R1 institution for people to know we're not just taking up space, but we're holding space and playing an active role, not only for our students, but also our communities. So we do have, of course, a Black Alumni Oral History collection that we collaborate with and partner with the Alumni Association. We want to do more digitally and make that accessible, but it's a rather extensive collection. We also naturally have the Georgia Tech Afro-American Student Association records, which was formed in '68. What I really like about our collections, because you know we are a STEM-based school, we actually have a significant documentation on Black sci-fi. And I think that's something we as a culture sometimes don't always document the subcultures. And I think that's really important, really interesting. We have that program at Georgia Tech, so naturally we do programming and events around it. We highlight the collections, we bring in Black sci-fi authors, so of course it's heavily in our archives. And it's something that's active, we're constantly doing. So a few collections particularly I wanted to highlight was Onyx Con. Have you ever heard of it? Onyx Con, of course, we have the records for about 15 years. The multicultural sci-fi organization in Atlanta's sci-fi film organizations, the festival. It's not all Black, but it is multicultural, so of course there is highlights there. I think it's also pretty awesome that we have a number of rare books in, of course, like the Black Scholar periodical dating back to '69, and the Negro Yearbook that documented, well, 25 to 26, that documents the work of African Americans, over 17,000 entries when, you know, we were being the usual, ignored. Thank you.
So I'll talk about what happened before I came to Georgia State. So I was at the AUC with Aletha. So there I was fortunate enough to be a processing archivist, and I was fortunate because I got to physically work with the collection. So I got to process a collection of a Black architect who was based here in Atlanta, Oscar Harris, who had a lot to do with the 1996 Olympics and the airport. So you can still see his work today. And then I got to process Grace Towns Hamilton papers, and she was the first African-American woman elected to the Georgia General Assembly. I felt like we became best friends. She passed in like 1992 before I was even born. I am dating myself right now. But we were best friends. I found a picture of her with a cat. Like, I have cats. She was with a cat. Like, we're together, yes. So I was very fortunate there to be able to work in such a great space, but I'm going to let Aletha talk about that space. So at Georgia State University, we have such specific collecting areas, 8 collecting areas, and none of them are titled African American collections, unfortunately. But within those collecting areas, we have various collections. I am responsible for music and pop culture, but I want to save the best for last. So I'll get into the other ones. The ones that started with Southern Labor. And if we think, and it is dedicated to the workers, not the organizations, not those corporations. And if you think about workers in Atlanta and such like that, such as sanitation workers, because we have the local union, 1644, that's Black men. We have the National Domestic Workers Union that was started by Dorothy Bolden, Black women. So within various collections, we have that, like the AFL-CIO civil rights records that are digitized and online. In our gender and sexuality collections, we have the Second Sunday records, which is a group of Black gay men. I will say that all of us are doing more to incorporate diversity and inclusion in our collections while being a part of the state government, which is very hard because we have so many different policies and things to follow, or try not to be seen but still make access possible. We have our photographic collections, which include the Atlanta Journal-Constitution photographs, which are like 8 million plus. Probably growing to even more. So those include images of like Hank Aaron and other significant Black people, but also protests and strikes from these labor protests and various other things like Black Lives Matters and stuff like that. So within our collections, we have these things. We could be doing so much better. And then with music and pop culture, I started the Atlanta Hip Hop Archives, and hip hop is Black. I'm sorry, it is. It's global, but Black people started it. We all know that. So, and that's to document and preserve the history of Atlanta hip hop through oral histories and other work. And I also started our Southern Visual Storytelling Collection, which is focused on Southern-based authors and creators creating comic book, graphic novels, and the like. And I love when I can go to conventions and find Black authors and creators and get their work and pay for it, not just be like, can I have this? So I'm very excited to do what I do and be able to incorporate my lived experience into it. So yeah, I think I took enough time.
Hello, okay, hello, hi. I'm Aletha. I work at the Atlanta University Center, Robert W. Woodruff Library, and we service the AUC community. So that's Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark Atlanta University, ITC, and hopefully Morris Brown will be joining us again. So our archival collection is vast. If you can imagine, we collect collections, or we collect archives for all of our institutions. I specifically work with Morehouse College, and so that's their historical documents, their administrative documents, their publications, And that is the same for Spelman and Clark. Spelman has their own archives, but we still collect for them. But on to what we collect. So we really cover, yes, our institutions, our stakeholders, but we also cover the African American diaspora. So there's a lot of local history collections there, and also some that are not. But some of our most notable collections are Martin Luther King Jr., the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. collection. We are the custodians of that. We also have Maynard Jackson is another very popular collection from his mayoral candidacy. A lot of people research the child murders when they want to do research on that. They use that collection, and we have a lot of artists. That's something that they've really been collecting on more recently, more current African American artists. But I guess the artist that comes to mind is Henry O. Tanner. If you're familiar with him, we have a collection on him. We have collections that are around religious topics. We have a lot of ministers, and we also have some collections around slave documents and holdings, civil rights, Black Power, student movement, the Atlanta student movement. We have a collection on that. So it's very vast. It's very, very broad. We have, I think, over 300, somewhere around there, 300 collections to choose from the African American experience.
Thank you all. We don't have a representative from the Auburn Avenue Research Library up here, but you all may be familiar with the collections here. You can learn more, of course, if you head upstairs or make an appointment or view online. But certainly this is a repository of robust African American collections as well. So want to certainly acknowledge that. So I want to get you all's perspectives on contemporary collecting. So we kind of touched on that. You all talked about what's kind of in your holdings now and the diversity of it. What about collecting of groups within the African American community? We talk about, documentation of women, LGBTQ communities. Aisha mentioned about sci-fi and music. Brittany mentioned. Can you all share your thoughts on how you think Atlanta, the institutions in Atlanta, are they doing a good job of collecting kind of diverse communities within the African American, within the African American sphere community? Anyone can start.
Okay, I'm happy to start. So will speak mostly about the Rose Library's collections, but I do want to acknowledge that Rose Library and any predominantly white institution is very new to this game because HBCUs have been doing this since their existence, and they always thought Black people were cool, and it hasn't just, sort of been something that has happened within the last 20 or 30 years. And, Auburn Avenue Research Library is, I think, a part of that legacy. So I think in terms of just having those institutions in this city, yes, I think that we are doing a wonderful job that we have the existence of that institution. I don't know if you all are aware of how lucky we are to be in a city like Atlanta where you can really be surrounded by Black collections, like no matter where you are within the city. So in that regard, I'll start by saying yes. The one thing that I wish that institutions around the city would do a bit more of is just collect the everyday Black experience. So as we were all going across our collections, you might have noticed a trend of folks that are noteworthy or organizations that have been in existence. But what I'm seeing, particularly from young people that come to the Rose Library to do research, is that they're just wondering, okay, so while the civil rights movement was happening, you hear about Dr. King, you hear about Joseph Lowry, you hear about Ralph David Abernathy, you hear about Evelyn Lowry, you hear about, so many of these big figures, but what was the average person doing? What was the average person saying? I think institutions know to go after those folks that are pillars in the community, but what is the way that we can get just the average person in Atlanta to know that their story is important? I think what resonated with many of the presentations that were happening yesterday and even the keynote remarks last night was that people don't, Black people with the struggles that we have had in this country just don't think our stories are always important. And if we're only focusing on the stories of someone that has some level of quote unquote notoriety, we're actually furthering that barrier to let the average person know that we do care about their stories. One of the things that I do think might be able to help this is, the presentation from the Archive and the Black Web about sort of making that connection, that it might be a little bit more accessible for the average person to sort of archive their web presence. But when we're thinking about these physical collections that are often, are in all of our repositories, I do think that we can do a bit better outreach to just folks that might have, just a regular everyday experience. If I can just, I know I've been talking for a second, but if I can just share this one quick story is there's a faculty member that I work with, or a retired faculty member that I work with so much, and I was actually talking to her about her own papers, and she was like, why would someone want to have my papers? And I was like, we have been researching in archival collections for the last 5 years. Why somebody would want to have your papers. And, and so she was just, sharing a story about her family being the last Black family in North Georgia, in this town in North Georgia, because of, pushing Black people out. And then she just casually mentions, I had the tax receipts from when my family was paying the taxes. And I was like, that's important, right? It's important to your family, but that's important, right? But she was like, well, they're not really well known. Nobody knows them. It's just important to me. And I think that's what, that's the impact of when we are only thinking about, in Rose Library's context, the Alice Walkers and the Pearl Cleggs and the Tina McElroy Ensas of the world, but what happens when, we do invest in just, appreciating the everyday story.
Yeah. So, we talk a lot in our instruction sessions at Georgia State about archival silences, and Black people are a part of those silences. There's a lot of our history that we won't ever get back because those documents are gone. Georgia State is a predominantly Black institution, and for the longest time we haven't been collecting on our students. And so part of my work, even though I'm the music and pop culture archivist, I am actually manage our student ambassadors program, where I started, it's my thing. It's my baby. Besides the hip hop archives, it's one of my babies. If you know me, I do everything. So they are supposed to engage students through social media and get them interested in the archives. And through that, we were able to do workshops with the student photographers and get them interested in donating their own photographs. I teach zine making workshops and want them to do zines about their lives and donate them to the archives. And then the other thing is oral histories. We have a ginormous oral history program at Georgia State. We've been doing it since our founding in 1971. So my whole thing with the Atlanta Hip Hop Archives is I don't really care how important you are to hip hop in general. You're important because you're part of that community. So your name doesn't need to be there in lights. So I want everyday people who just listen to hip hop and are in Atlanta or have been in Atlanta to want to share their stories and want to be a part of that. So I'm hoping that people will donate to that in the form of an oral history to preserve their stories. But there's multiple ways we can get these stories, and as a music and pop culture archivist, I love the music side of it, and I love the zine side of it, and I'm just hoping to grow that side of it while also working with our other archivists. So
I think it's important to note we are very extremely lucky to be in a city like Atlanta, Black Mecca, to be able to be in a location, particularly in the South, that actually embraces everything it is to be African American, and really not trying to whitewash that out. But also, institutions knowing their place is important as well. So while I am at Georgia Tech, could we be doing more? Yes. Is it our place to in the Atlanta community? I do not think so. What I do believe, though, is Georgia Tech Library, specifically our archives, have done what needed to be done within our institution. If you're from Atlanta, if you've been in Atlanta long enough, you know Georgia Tech, right? And particularly any R1 institution reads the same story, right? So what I have found that we have done, because STEM is such a, still very much so niche areas, and like I mentioned, the subcultures within, we've been filling the gaps with those subcultures. So like Black STEM is something that I feel like America's just really coming into. And for quite some time, a few decades, at least since, of course, civil rights movement, there's been intentional documentation of it. But, and I will say, a recent project, actually, one of my archivists is in the audience, Alex Brinson's, her project, where we uncovered records mislabeled. They were actually in our Board of Regents, but they were one of our initial African-American students who was denied. And she located those records. So proud of her. She located those records, but so we could have more about our students, but also the early on organizational practices of archives, you know. Of course, every archives has a significant backlog, so we're finding more, but what we're doing as an institution is highlighting subcultures within STEM. So I think that's really important. Our place in the community, of course, we significantly contribute to the economy of the state and to the economy of the city of Atlanta. But I'm not going to sit here and say it is our place to go, and you have all these amazing institutions that focus on that. We will, like we do, collaborate with the HBCUs, with Auburn Avenue and other institutions, but it's our job to bring light to them. We stay in our lane. We document our students and their journeys and their stories, particularly our African American students, but it is our job to support other institutions that don't have the level of privilege that we do. We stay in our lane.
Yeah. So I think with our archives sort of being inherently very African American, we are collecting on our stakeholders, our students. I think that we could probably do a little bit better with our minority communities, our LGBTQ, IA plus communities. We could probably do a little bit better. I think we talked about having space and holding space. I think we do a good job of holding space, like physical space in the library, but in terms of collecting, I think we have a little bit of a deficit there that we are aware of, and we're trying to work on it. But you know, people also have to feel comfortable in donating and sharing those, you know, documents and things of that nature. So I think that that's, you know, definitely a space for us to grow on. And in the larger community, I think we can even do better in Atlanta for the current things that are happening. This is going to sound bad because anybody can have an archives, but I feel like as an archivist, my skin crawls when I see things that are like, you took the picture, you put it in a frame, and you put it on the wall, and I'm like, is that the original picture in the frame on the wall? So yes, anybody can have an archives. You can create an archives, and you can make an exhibit, but you should include actual archivists, the people who actually work with original documents and can help you either organize it, create access to it, or display it. So that's probably my only little rub with, what do we call them? Independent archivists?
Community.
Community archivists? Yes. We're always happy to partner with our community archivists to support. No, I'm done.
Oh, Brittany, were you going to?
Oh, I was just gonna say I love community archivists. Don't get me wrong, but so all of us here have master's degrees, right? We worked hard for those, so we're experts. So I want communities to feel empowered to keep their records because God knows we don't have the space for them. Georgia State don't have money like that. So I want them to come to us. I want to be an outlet to help you understand how to do it. We don't need to take possession of everything, but I want people to use our expertise.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to say, and I think you all have also said it, you know, I think it is important to not be extractive when we're working with communities. And, you know, some communities do need to keep their records close to them. And, you know, it changes the context when it does come into institutions. And I think we have to be very clear and, you know, also own up to the fact that institutions are institutions and they have not, you know, institutions of all kinds and have not always done the right thing in all areas. The one other thing that I wanted to say to sort of further address your question, Andrea, is I would love for Atlanta and the archives here. Black excellence, I love, but I really want us to like be documenting the real Atlanta. Like, let's document some of our strip clubs. Let's document some of, you know, the chicken spots, y'all. I didn't eat lunch, so I'm really hungry. So I'm thinking about wings, you know. But the restaurants, you know, just like, you know, some of these places that aren't, you know, there aren't the churches there. It's not the, you know, the leaders and the icons that we look up to, but somebody looks up to, you know, to these folks. Yeah, it's actually, and I think that's another way of like saying that we want to have a community. We know that Atlanta, as we think about it, the culture would not be here without all of those places. So let's begin to really collect in those places. And I think that's how we're going to really get young people to see themselves in the archives. Like, you know, it is great for us to have these historical collections, but we also want the current, you know, young people to see themselves in our materials. And y'all, it's not only just Black Lives Matter. We gotta, you know, there are other movements, there are other things that people are interested in, you know, like hip hop, like, you know, sci-fi and speculative fiction that we could be doing more of.
I want to continue on this thread about community archives. So everyone on this panel has primarily, we're including myself, at academic institutions. Not everybody, but right now we are all a part of academic institutions. So whether or not your institution is working with community, could you speak to, as we talk about the future of Black collections, can you speak to just initiatives in general, whether it's at your institution or just others that you're aware of that are working in collaboration with communities? And how, you know, how do you see that? What can our institutions do better, or, you know, just other institutions that are doing, working with Black communities in particular to help advance community archiving?
So for us, it's the communities of our students that we haven't acknowledged. I mentioned, of course, Black Sci-Fi, LGBTQIA, our Greek organizations, specifically, of course, Divine Nine. We have not done the best job at documenting alt, right? Alternative to all things mainstream. So the community of our students is what our focus is. I think the first thing, of course, and I think anybody would agree with that, is acknowledging there's a gap, right? Like, we can't, oh yeah, we got these university archives and presidential papers. Yeah, those are a given. You're an institution. That is what you are supposed to do, is make sure you got those records. And to an extent, that's also state law, right? Because that's records retention and management. Those are policies. We have to do those things. So archivists become more conscious when they're doing more than what they are supposed to do. So we have a really amazing group. Excuse me, sorry, something's in my eye. the audience. I'm a comedian in my other life. No, but we have recently, with intention, the archives is one of the areas that's under my umbrella, and I know my department head was so excited to have me come on board because they did not have an archivist before. So when you have an archivist in leadership, there's a different kind of support and influence. So I think within the past 2 years, we've hired at least four or five archivists, from traditional instruction, processing, also to, of course, the digital portion. I think we have to be oh yeah, I'm good for taking people. Listen, I'm not. Listen, I am so good at getting the right knowledge under my roof, because it's all about that diverse perspective and experience. And I mean, y'all just had some amazing people, and I'm like, come on over here, so I got you, and I'm not done. So that is a fair warning. That is a fair warning. But we need that because we did not have that. So who's documenting makes it significant, because we get to say what's important is archivists, right? To an extent, you have to understand the power of archives and the influence that you have as an archivist. And our influence looked very monochromatic. And we needed to shift that. We needed to change that. So who's doing the work makes a significant difference. And that's how we started changing our approach. So, yeah.
I think we can do better. Just be better, do better. I don't know about you, but I'm tired. And I will admit I am the only Black woman, only person of color in my department that isn't a student. So I struggle with that on a consistent basis. But I will say that outside of Georgia State, we have made some strides in changing our ways. State institutions can be so rigid in what they do, and we need to stop being so proud and just change. So one of our collecting areas is Atlanta Civic and Neighborhood History. And there is more than just Atlanta. There's Metro Atlanta, right? And there is Buford Highway areas. This goes outside of Black people, but still Black people. And the Buford Highway area is multi-ethnic. And they have a We Love Bu High group, an organization. And they are interested in documenting who they are and their people. So they reach out to Georgia State because we have a strong oral history program. And for once, we didn't take over. I wasn't involved in this, but we are partners in that. We taught them about oral histories, how to do them. We do regular workshops, and they own their oral histories, and we preserve them. We have a similar program in our trans oral history project. Our gender and sexuality archivist is not trans, and she wanted the advisory board to be trans people and also the people doing the oral histories to be trans. And I see that's something we can do with our Black archives. But I'm not saying that I need to be just the person doing that at Georgia State. So we need more of us in the room. I was so fortunate when I was at the AUC to have majority of us there. So I appreciate that. And Aisha will probably still more of us.
Yeah, this is hard when it comes to us because I think our hurdle is not so much, we do oral histories, we work with our communities, we work with our local high schools, we do instruction, we partner, we look for grants, like we're doing that constantly. I think our hurdle is staffing, staffing and funding. It's not that we don't do that work, we need more people to do more of that work. So a lot of us are doing more than one job. I mean, we all know what that's like. Most of us are doing more than just archival work. So I think where I have the privilege to work at, it's not that we're not serving those communities or identifying those communities. I think we need just more manpower and funding, I think.
So, Aisha made me think, all of you, when we talk about, who is making decisions. So some of you in the audience may have heard, and I know my colleagues up here have heard about the alleged sanitizing of history by the Archivist of the United States, Dr. Colleen Shogan. And reports have indicated that she may have directed her staff to remove objects and descriptions for materials deemed negative in an exhibition at the National Archives Museum in Washington, D.C. So, can you speak about this, your impressions on the matter, and why those of us who are documenting African American materials are so necessary to be at the table to ensure that our diverse histories are not forgotten and we're not sanitizing history, for especially at these free institutions in Washington, D.C. that serve the country, serve our citizens, and I mean, quite frankly, are not, and not in southern states where, or in states that are, banning these stores, I mean, this is in Washington, D.C., under a Biden appointed Archivist of the United States. So let's talk about it.
Are we allowed to curse? Oh, apologies to the people online or whatever. It's just censorship. That's what it is. And it's not okay. It's completely not okay. I feel for my NARA colleagues who have to deal with this. And this is what you get when someone is in charge who's not an archivist. She may be our first woman archivist, but that doesn't mean anything if she can't actually do the job. So yes, I'm peeved.
So when I saw it on TikTok, because I love TikTok, I immediately sent it to Andrea, and I'm like, did you see this? And I was very peeved because we do have an ethic in our community, and while people like to look at us as gatekeepers, we like to ensure that you have access to what's there. I know that there are 3 versions of the truth, yours, mine, and the actual truth, but it's never our job to sanitize, change, add, take away. And so if that's being done, that is a problem because you are revising it. And that's not okay. You're taking away space, somebody's voice, and for it to be done at such a high level is very disturbing. You would not think that the United States Archivist would be telling her staff to do something like that. And I feel like, especially in this time where we are in, where a lot of our stories are being banned and removed out of curriculums and spaces of learning, is very concerning, because if they're doing it to our community, they can do it to any other community or minority community. So it is definitely an issue. I don't know how that will be resolved, but it's definitely not okay. It's not a good look at all.
Yeah, I want to just echo that I do think it's very appalling. And the first thought that I had, honestly, was, man, this is how people are going to find out what an archivist does. And I think we have such an issue of people just understanding what we do as a profession. And then the time that people is on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, it's a negative piece for someone, as Brittany has mentioned, that is not a professional archivist. is deeply concerning. But I think should be concerning to all of us. And as the National Archives, your tax dollars are going towards this. And if you don't agree with that, you can send letters, you can send notices, you can do all of the things. And that even goes for state-run institutions, county-run institutions, any of those things. Like, don't just be appalled on, with your homies. You need to be appalled and actually, letting your voice be heard, because otherwise, I forget who has, some wonderful Black woman has, I think it was Zora Neale Hurston, if you're silent, they will kill you and think that you liked it. So, we have to really be vocal about those types of things. But I will say that we are seeing that happen on a national scale, but this is happening in most institutions. I will say that. I'm not going to stand on stage to, call my institution out or throw my institution under the bus, but I do think that as Emory University being a private institution that is shielded a bit more than some of our colleagues at state institutions, and we're collecting African American collections, we have a bigger responsibility. But I do think that to the point that everyone was making before, you have to have the people in the leadership positions that are able to say, we have a different responsibility because all of these things. So I think the advocacy that we all are doing in our own way, I think is really important. But I also, again, just want to implore the folks that are in the audience or the people that are watching the live stream, if this is touching you in a particular way, please do make your voice heard, because this is the only way that this is going to change, especially as we are having an administration change, and an administration that is not necessarily set up to want to see Black people and Black stories promoted. And so I think that we have to exercise with with our voices and also with our dollars too. If I'm gonna throw that out there, boycotts come back.
Okay, so listen. Because first of all, what you have to recognize is performative allyship. Let's start there. What you secondly have to recognize, which is what we've seen with the shift that's about to happen. Nope. I'm good. Any other time, but not when I'm talking. Right? So the shift. So we have to recognize performative allyship, and you have to recognize self-preservation, because that's what we just saw in the election, and that's what but this is, and I think it's kind of you to use alleged, because if you're, it's so politically correct. But if you know, we've been hearing about this, right, for quite some time, and somebody did some whistleblowing. And it is absolutely disgusting, but this is what I think we should emotionally prepare ourselves to see over the next couple. Because while people say that they are all about representation and inclusion, self-preservation shows who you truly are. And this is very much so performative allyship when we're talking about you're in the highest position within our profession. We've been waiting for a woman to be able to gain access to this position, right? And then this happens. And this is the organization, and I've worked for NARA, this is the organization in which we are supposed to look to. This builds a different kind of distrust not only for our profession, but the communities in which we serve, right? But it also makes room and space for absolute foolishness. Because while we are fighting censorship, ban books, we're really just fighting intellectual freedom, right? And it's about access and literacy, and America already has a literacy problem, and if you don't think they do, look at just what happened last week, And now people are like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen and this was going to happen. Did you not read? Okay? Because those are life skills, but understanding and comprehending, like, that's literacy. And America has a literacy problem, but what's happening with the AOTIS, the Archivist of the United States, that is making way for other federal organizations, other state organizations, your counties, all of them that are fighting against intellectual freedom. Now they have an example at the top. That's the dangerous part of it, but this is so much performative to get in the house because she wasn't doing this. Why you not vetting them like you did Claudine Gay? Well, who didn't do the vetting? Because somebody performed so well that they were able to become AOTIS under a Democratic president, just to say, oh, I can switch lanes. Let me take this mask off now. So how many people are responsible for that? And understanding that performance literally just made groundwork for all these states, their governors, and everybody else to say, yeah, it's go time now. This is dangerous.
And we live in one of those states.
Listen, I want y'all to understand the danger in performative allyship, because that policy change, those actions, like they're not all of that protesting and boycotting and stuff on that end, they're not doing that no more. Because it's easier to just change policy. It's easier to get in place where you have influence, which is why we say the people influence matter. So just as much as we're progressing, we're also So I'm disgusted, to say the least, but I think it is something that we need to seriously, if you had any shades on, because we're not allowed to have rose-colored glasses, but if you have any shades on, please take them off, because it's about to get real.
I just want to add that archives are not neutral, and we should fight and be fighting and have been fighting, and we need to learn how to be advocates for ourselves. And I will say that archives have been unsafe, right? Like, they have harmful content, offensive content. All of us have dealt with that. And we're still sharing that with the public because it needs to be shared. You can't just pick and choose what's okay to share. That's not right. It's not our place, and I'm sorry, replacing an image of MLK with Nixon with Elvis? No. No. Like, allegedly doing that. I'm not very PC.
Speak plainly, please. Okay, we're going to get ready for some Q&A from the audience, but I do want to, before we do that, I want to take a moment to ask you all what keeps you engaged in being an archivist, because we've talked a little bit about some of the negative aspects, but we are all, especially, it's funny, Aisha and I, we will always say we are archivists no matter what, we're not in the collections, right now daily, but we always claim we are archivists, and we are. But I want to know what positively keeps you engaged here as we talk about the future of Black archives and what you see as what you can do to have a great impact on Black collections in general. And then we're going to open it up, so y'all get ready.
For me, it's because I know what I'm doing is going to last. I know that every time I put a document in a folder, somebody is going to benefit from it one day. And maybe it also has to do with how I was raised and having a reverence and an appreciation for the people who came before me, and making sure that the people come after me are aware, or at least have an opportunity to be aware of the things that took place and the sacrifices that were made in order for me to be in the position that I'm in. So for me, it's personal, because it's preserving legacy. Like I work at a HBCU. I'm on hollow ground every day. I know that sounds cliche, but I'm on hollow ground every day, and I'm looking and preserving and ensuring that somebody who comes after me gets to have that same experience, that same feeling. So for me, it's just really the privilege and the honor to be doing a work that I know that's going to last for a long time after I'm gone. So it's really just that simple for me.
I'm trying to save the world. Okay, so listen. And I wholeheartedly mean that. It sounds wild. But the only way that we can continue to progress through everything that is against us is to know what people dealt with before us, right? Because in that moment, it's like the world is ending, but there's people, generations, who've gone through worse. And it's like, all right, it can always be worse. And I wholeheartedly mean it because I read it. I've seen the pictures. I've emotionally embodied the records. You know what I mean? So it's like, I need people to know we can do this. You know what I mean? Like we can get through this. It's terrible, right? But the community that we still have, we can continue to build it. It's a matter of literacy in a different kind of way that I don't think we as mainstream have explored. But, you know, and then there's that cliche, if you really don't know where you're going, unless you know where you come from, like that's Bible. Right? It's just, you cannot deny that, and having particularly the younger generation understand, because we have to remember now that they are so far away from the civil rights movement, they have no emotional connection to it like we do. Our parents was in it, our grandparents was in it, like, you know what I mean? Like we have an emotional and physical connection to it. So it's really about not only that preservation of the legacy, but getting people to keep it and, you know, have it live on. So I think that's going to be a key way in how we continue to survive and thrive.
Yeah, I think it's students and the communities I work with, and they keep me going. I don't know if I'd do it without them some days. Yeah, and when I get to dedicate time to instruction rather than donor meetings, I'm always happy. And knowing that it is for the greater good, because I see them being interested and wanting to do it. And, you know, making a few new archivists every once in a while is always nice.
So two things come to mind for me. One is I've been at Emory. This is my 13th year at Emory. And the reason why I stay, I think, is because the reading room looks so different today than it did 13 years ago. I think 13 years ago, the reading room catered to and I'm speaking about the reading room because that's what my role is to be over our public services. It looked very different. It was mostly white male scholars that were in our reading room, and it pleases me every day, several times a week, that I will walk by the reading room and it is all Black people in our reading room. And it just reminds me, and, if I can just invoke Dr. Ashley Farmer's work, Archiving While Black, really talking about what does it mean to be a Black person in a reading room space, and are people planning for you to be there? So that keeps me. And then the other thing is really, I think, to pay homage to someone like Andrea, who has been such a mentor to all of us on this stage. And it's, wanting to make someone like Andrea proud, wanting to be in conversation, in community with, practicing archivists that I know are thinking about this work in the same way that I am. And then when you see this baby that comes up to you and they're just like, I love history, I want to be an archivist. And you're just like, oh, of course I have to keep doing this work. So, it comes full circle. So, thank you, Andrea, and thank you all, here for just the work that you do.
I'm not that old, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I mean, I appreciate that because, and actually, I was gonna say this really is the future of archives, and when Derek said, I said, oh, Black women, and okay, because quite frankly, when I went to graduate school in 2001, it was clear that there was a shift happening. I had great Black women and men mentors in the archives profession, but it is a white man or white woman privileged profession that you can go to graduate school and study history and archives. It's not something that Black folks do, so I'm thankful that all of these women are up here. I'm thankful for Derek, and I'm thankful for all the people that are coming forward. When we go to these conferences and we're seeing new Black faces, we're like, this is amazing. So okay, now questions from you. I hope we have some.
No? 1 2 1 2. All right. So yeah, thank you, Black women, for leading yet again. I appreciate you. So I actually got a question for each four of you separately, but I'm gonna pass the mic and just ask one, based off of things y'all said. But so I think it was Gabrielle. So you talked about the blacks in the left, right? And so I guess with identity reductionism running rampant, I'm curious how you engage on how important it is to make sure that Black sisters on the left are being heard and not ostracized and kind of pushed away. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And yeah.
Yeah, I think just the very existence of the collections, furthers that. I think what it really takes is people actually coming to engage with those materials. I think, one of the things that I have noticed trends of is like movements that have existed for a long time, like something like Blacks in the Left. You'll have, not even just newer organizations that will be like, we're doing this really great thing, and it's like, well, if you looked in these records, they did that too, and they had really, so like, if the records as a way to like actually continue your movement, to see like what were the things that worked, what didn't work, maybe the context around why that may not have worked in that time. I really want, we're talking about archives, I think, in a real way, but we're talking about it because we are collecting, we're doing this work because we actually want people to use it, and we want people to use it for whatever works in their life. We say research, and that has sort of an academic connotation to it, but it is really use it for whatever it means for you.
Hi, my name is Nakazi Oates. I'm the curator of African American collections at Stuart Rose, and I want to follow up on a couple things. This was a phenomenal panel first. The other thing too that I want to say is thank you all as archivists. As a curator, I know I don't do my work without archivists, so I just want to acknowledge you all publicly. I wanted to make a point about the shift of race and gender in leadership. It wasn't until my current job that I saw a Black woman in leadership, and that means a lot for someone in this profession. And now to my question, and it's specifically to Dr. Johnson and Brittany, because you two work at institutions where you don't have a collected area of African Americans. And so thinking about the title of this presentation, or this panel rather, Access and Use, how do you make those specific collections, whether it is Black sci-fi or Atlanta hip hop, discoverable for your particular researchers?
I attend a lot of events. My job is not 9 to 5. I try to be wherever I can be, tabling, making sure people are aware that this is happening and getting them involved, because Atlanta Hip Hop Archives won't exist without the community. So I'm there. I'm also at like comic conventions for the Black comic stuff that I do, and then I have a web page that specifically talks about the Atlanta Hip Hop Archive, so people can discover that. And then we're constantly putting things in digital collections. A lot of my oral histories are being transcribed right now to go online. But it's we make buttons in the house. I'm handing out buttons. I'm talking to people. I email people on a constant basis, like, "Hey, you've heard of the Atlanta Hip Hop Archives? Want to be a part of it?" Like, but it's just like doing the work and being willing to do things after work for me, and just making sure they're aware that even though it doesn't say Black or African American, we are here for you, and we have stuff that would help with your research.
I would say so. One of the things that I recognize is the privilege of my position and the privilege of my institution. First of all, the privilege of my institution, that's money, right? The privilege of my position is how that money gets used. And I, for one, am the first African American administrator the library has hired, and the first African American external faculty member hired in about 30 years. So, right. But let's keep in mind, everybody on this stage been the first at something in this profession. It's the profession's issue, right? But, so, yes, as an archivist, I am in many places. I mean, my whole moniker literally is Dr. Archivist. This is something I will never let go. I am a librarian, but my niche is archiving. In my own research, I use archival research to present all my studies. So in my role, in my position, I'm going to make sure my influence and my privilege uplifts diversity, representation, and inclusion. I am very intentional about this. I've had this platform my entire career on purpose, and Georgia Tech know what they hired. I do not dim my light. I'm very intentional about saying, you know what I'm about to do. And hands down, I mean it. So understanding and having, let me be very clear, because you can't do this without support of your institution, and having leadership that allows you to authentically exist in these very white spaces. And I have support from the top and the rest of my entire organization, because again, they chose me and I chose them. So making sure, like, the archives itself has a solid $250,000 budget versus saying, okay, well, we'll figure out what we gonna do. Throw that money that way. They have intention we have a huge rare book collection. All right, put some money over there. We talked about sci-fi. Let's put some money behind not only those collections, but as well as our programming. So, it's not only my advocacy as an archivist, but it's also the advocacy that I have and the influence over that budget, over fiscal responsibility, and I hire only advocates. And I've never met an archivist who is not of majority that is not an advocate. So making those collections accessible beyond normal archival practices, processing, access, digitization, is very much so in my advocacy work and the people that I yield influence over. Thank you.
Thank you all for your work. So many interesting things to talk about, but I have a couple of things I'm interested in. I work closely with Dr. Harry Robinson, who is the president of the Dallas African American Museum, and he received his degree from Atlanta University, which is now Clark Young University. And I just learned, just yesterday, speaking to some of these things, that the book collection that he was stewarding at Bishop College is housed here. He took the archives with him, and they are now at the Dallas African American Museum from Bishop College. So I'm interested in how, the histories of some of these collections get split up and disseminated, but I'm also interested in, some innovative ways you all think about archiving. I talk about this all the time. Something that your mom may have on her dinner table may be viewed as, low value. It's the exact same thing, but preserved and in a beautiful space that's in a museum that's worth thousands of dollars, right? And so this perception of value, I think archivists are, on the cusp of being like futurists that can determine value, right? So what do you all think about, this concept of value when it comes to Black people's things very specifically? Obviously, a newfound interest in some of our things from these institutions, and how Black people can participate in that value and perception and narrative shaping, right? That creates more value.
I would like to try to answer half of that question. I want to talk about value. So one of the things that we talk about in archives is enduring value. So it's not so much that we're looking at how much something is worth, because we don't appraise things. We're looking for what information that object or that document holds, if it has enduring value, right? So whatever that thing is on your mother's coffee table or your dinner table, could be a recipe. That is something that has enduring value in our community, because we know our recipes change, but over time, and we lose a lot of things because we typically don't even write that kind of stuff down. Typically, our grandmothers are like, you just put a pinch of this in there and throw a little bit of that. So if it's actually written down, that is something that we maybe even consider sacred, but that is something that has enduring value. So when we're looking at stuff like that, it's not for monetary reasons. I just wanted to sort of clarify that portion of your question.
Yes. I agree with all that you said. And I think you have to put the value on it yourself. And, Black people have to do that for ourselves and not be, thinking about what value other people are putting on it. It's valuable because it was on your mother's mantle, and that's value. And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about, because archivists and archives, or archivist, like Aletha has mentioned, we're not thinking about the monetary value of things because of that enduring value. Institutions are thinking about the monetary value of those things. So I just want to let you know, make that point of distinction there. And one of the things that correlates, I think, to something that we were talking about before is, if we don't think our things are valuable in the beginning, then we are approached or we are considering putting our things into an institution, we're already going to be thinking the institution knows best. We also need to be thinking about how I mentioned institutions like AUC has been in this, for a long time. Predominantly white institutions, they have not. They've just started thinking that this was a value, and they want to collect these things. And and they're coming to tell you that it's valuable, you need to tell them that it's valuable. And that way you can actually have a more honest conversation about this. I encourage communities, get your own appraisal on materials, because there is, while we're talking about appraisal from a intellectual place, from a monetary place, you as an individual or you as a family, you can get your own monetary appraisal on something. That may not matter if an institution says we only, some institutions, they're only going to accept donations, and there's a lot of value in that, and the institutions can take great care, and just because they're not giving a dollar amount doesn't mean that they care less about your materials. But I do think you want to know who the ask is coming from, and you want to think about the history of that institution and when they got in the game and what is it to benefit them. This needs to be something that is mutually beneficial for not only just, spreading the word about like different Black experiences, but also for your family too. So I just, wanted to just add to the conversation that institutions are thinking about finances, even if archivists ourselves are just thinking about how do we preserve this for the future.
And I also wanted to add to that too.
Did I cut you off?
No,
I'm
you
sorry.
didn't. You didn't at all. Yeah. So my institution, we do not pay for collections. So sometimes that becomes an issue because depending on where you are as the donor and what you're looking for, you may be looking for a place that's going to be in a position to give you money. But to your other part of your question is, you would want to keep in mind, does your collection make sense in that place, right? You want to put your family collection in a place where it's going to make sense with other collections. Are the people that you would want to see your collection going to have access at that place? Is this institution going to promote and let people know that your collection even exists? So while there may be some monetary value, you will have to think about, because you asked about splitting collections, a lot of times it does come down to money, and some people just don't know that it's not good to split a collection, and they just do what feels good in the moment. But you have to think about the actual repository that you're adding your collection to. It may not always be about how much the institution could pay you, because Emory and Georgia Tech can give you a whole lot of money that the Atlanta University Center is not going to give you.
Or Georgia State.
Now, I'm not pro purchasing materials. That's not that's not my vibe. But I get, institutions do indeed have the privilege to do so. Quick lesson on archives, because I have been a professor at Clayton State and North Carolina Central and written archival material. I want you to, when Gabby mentioned this is new, I want you to know that archiving as a practice goes back to the French Revolution. Came over to America, and for all that time, only white male story and white male practicing was the profession. It did not become popular to document Black stories until the Civil Rights Movement, because it was profitable. Just to be clear there, this is a very old school practice, but it's new school money.
Black institutions were collecting in the early 1900s, But yes.
I want to share also that the future, you asked about the future. The future to me is partnership, not ownership. Institutions currently, their agreements say that they will physically own those materials. To me, I don't care if we own it or not. I want to be there to help you preserve your legacy. And work with that community to preserve that legacy. So if I have space for your stuff, let's create a partnership. It will need to be written down because Georgia State requires paperwork. And for future, paperwork is amazing. Just saying, I have dealt with no paperwork and it's very annoying. But that doesn't need to say that we own it. It needs to say that we are in partnership and collaboration. And you keep rights, you get licensing. I don't need to make money off of your stuff. You want to make money off of your photographs or whatever. So that is, in my mind, why community archiving is great, even though I'm we need to work together, because they know their community, they know what's valuable, but they don't have that space or the expertise to preserve it. And that's why we're here. So.
Hello, thank you all for all the work that you do. I'm not a historian, an archivist. I'm an educator in the public school system. I don't know if I have a question as much as a concern. When you all use the word, and maybe this is the language of academia, sanitizing something. As an educator, if I'm talking to Black children and I'm saying history was sanitized, when I think of sanitized, that means something was dirty. So how am I communicating that how are they hearing that? I don't know if I'm making this clear, but subconsciously, am I telling you that your history was dirty if we're using the word sanitized when something was removed? Now, how is this 5th grader or this 3rd grader or this 10th grader processing that word sanitized. Is there another word that could be used, or do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I took that straight from the article, but thank you for that. And I also want to say that I don't think it. I mean, it's African American, but it's not just. I mean, I think just anything negative. The point was that any negativity she was trying to, get rid of. But thank you for that point for sure.
I want to say on that, I want them to use that word because I need them to understand how our history is seen. I need the emotion to be evoked that they think what's negative or what's dirty is not important, but that's really not what they're saying. They're saying these people are not important. These people, they're saying white is right. I want negative language because there's a connotation behind it and how people perceive you. And I think that's very important for third graders, fifth graders, because we learn very early. I don't want them to have those rose-colored glasses. I want what's real, what's reality. And I think the article using the word sanitize was very pointed and intentional, because that is the word that is constantly used when we're talking about revising the history of indigenous people, black people, Hispanic people. There is an intention behind diction. And I think we need to, instead of using another word, explain that.
That explanation. And lie. It's a lie.
Hi, ladies. First off, I want to say thank you for being here. You are such an inspiration. My name is Sasha Jalan, and my question is, how do we ensure that communities maintain autonomy and self-sufficiency in preserving their own records while building trust with other institutions?
Community archives, that's what Aisha was saying. I think you all need to realize we don't have all the answers. We're still trying to figure it out. But if you don't have a voice at the table, then you have no voice at all, right? And when someone else is trying to represent you, it can be misconstrued. So we need to bring these communities to the table. We need to actually talk to them rather than about them and be like, oh, there's this organization. Let's just go get their stuff. No, like have an actual conversation with people and understand their needs and what they want out of this. And ensuring that if they don't want to add an institution, okay, how else can we help you?
I would like to thank everyone for coming to this session. This is the end of the session.
I can't be the last word.
Thank you all so much. And you can catch our panelists in the lobby if you have more questions for them. Thank you all.
Thank
Let's give
you.
them a
Thank you
hand.
so much.
Thank you.
Before you all leave, I work for the state. I do historic preservation work, and I'm the African American Programs Coordinator, and we do a corrections newsletter. And I would love